Nigerian president is going to be the guest today to share his perspective on the trajectory of how we've been going so far in Nigeria, and then to maybe help us tell us what's the next level for Nigeria. How do we chart a way forward? So you are all welcome to this very interesting and great series. The elections are over now. Most of the court cases are also over. We now know those that will be in charge at least for the next 4 years, whether at the presidency, in the various states, and in the national and state assemblies. Most of the cases have been decided. So we need to chart a way forward. Have we healed sufficiently? Is Nigeria ready now to come together and really see how we can move this nation forward? We are going to be discussing all of that, and then what's the next level for Nigeria. We have been on this journey for the last 3 to 4 years with Mr. President, and he's going to share a bit about that. Our very special guest today, who is the president of African Leadership Group, is not a guest to most of us. You all know him, Pastor Itwa Ighodalo. He's been very passionate about good governance in Nigeria. For the last almost 20 years, he has been at the forefront of pushing for better governance and getting the right people in place to lead this country aright. And he has joined so many groups, including, some pressure groups to see how they can form pressure and push the needle bit forward for Nigeria. And it was in that quest also that he started this leadership series to get good leadership for Nigeria and to get the right people in place. And all of you that are on the platform, many are members of the group, and we are still pushing ahead to see how we can get Nigeria to the kind of enviable standard or place that we think it should be. So the president is well known. I don't think I need to run his CV anymore. Pastor Itwa, he's a passionate lover of the country, a lover of good governance, wanting things to be done properly, compassionate philanthropist, has done quite a lot. He's a resident pastor, the senior pastor of Trinity House worldwide. He's resident in Lagos, Nigeria. Pastor, you are welcome. Let's welcome you to this forum. I hope I have done enough to introduce you. The topic says, together, taking Nigeria to the next level. It will assume that we're at one level and we need to move to another level. This next level was Buhari's second term slogan. The first one was, I think, change. And when they were coming back for the second 4 years, we are talking about the next level. So I hope it's not the Buhari's next level that we're talking about. But we are going to be looking at how Nigeria can really make progress, how we can come together, what we need to do as citizens, how we need to be holding our leaders accountable for what they are doing, and how we'll move forward. Pastor Itwa, you are welcome to this forum. Is Pastor Itwa there? Unmute yourself, sir.
He will join us now, but we have a short video to play about ALG. After the video, it will come up.
And before we play that video, if I may also just chime in to what Oga Level 2 has spoken. Pastor Itwa is also the president of Rebuild Nigeria Initiative. It's an organization that was formed to address conflict resolution and also all the dissenting voices, those that, in terms of what's going on around the nation, how do we come together to resolve the dissenting voices and really work on us as a group. So that is another initiative that he heads, which is also very important as we plan to move Nigeria forward. How do we come to the table to resolve our conflicts, whether it's ethnic clashes, whether it's religious clashes, all those factors that have really divided us as a nation, that has, I would say, has been weaponized to continue to, keep us down. So those are part of the initiatives that Mr. President is involved in, and he will be taking us through how we need to heal from those and come together as a united Nigeria. Thank you. Pastor Lu, please go ahead with the video. There's Can you have put on the sound? Can you share the sound as well, please?
Good evening, everyone.
You can complain.
Okay, I'm here for you.
Okay, go ahead, sir. They were playing the video, so maybe we'll stop the video and then you can.
They were doing what?
We were playing the video, so maybe we can stop that.
No, go ahead. Let them finish doing the video.
Yeah, go ahead with the video.
Everybody wants to see that change in it change. It will grant to everybody. Everybody wants to be grant to the change. The moment I want to video to I don't like kids. Everybody wants to be
If you've been on TikTok for a while, you must have heard about a ton of Africans telling you that Europeans stole Africa's resources. Now, there's a lot to say about that. First and foremost, most of these resources are still in Africa, and they're not being stolen by Europeans. They're actually being sold to Europeans by the African state leadership. Your own elites are robbing you. It's not us doing it, not anymore. The real issue, of course, is why aren't Africans using their own resources to do things? Why does Mr. Beast have to go to Kenya to build water wells? Why didn't the Kenyan government do it themselves? I suppose the Kenyan government could have done it themselves. They just chose not to do it. Nigeria is now a country of almost 220 million people, the largest country in Africa. But they only produce about 10% of the electricity that a small country like Hungary. Hungary only has 10 million people, but they produce 10 times as much electricity as Nigeria does. I mean, I know you want to have your Wakanda, right? But do you expect white people to give it to you? No, you're supposed to build it yourself. Having said all this, it is of course obvious that we Europeans in the North need to prepare for a possible, potential African rise in terms of technology and therefore also in terms of military capacity. And that means we in Europe need to already start looking ahead and thinking ahead about how we are going to win the war against Africa, because there will be a future war between Europe and Africa.
That's the end of the video.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pastor Olu, for that video. I guess Pastor would speak to that video a bit. But Pastor, you are welcome once again to this very special edition. It's an opportunity for you to really share your thoughts on what has transpired in Nigeria in the last couple of years, I dare say, and then the way forward, as we have tagged this session together, taking Nigeria to the next level. So what are your thoughts? The elections are over now. Most of the court cases are done with, and we now know those that are going to lead us in this country. As we settle down properly into governance, first, I would like you to take a look at the first 5-6 months of the Tinubu administration, and what are your thoughts generally about what has been happening before we go into how we can move forward?
Well, the elections have been finalized. The court cases have been finalized.
Yeah.
There's still this still hang in the air feeling by most Nigerians, and the fact that you now have a Tinubu administration that has been concluded in Nigeria. So I think the work is just about to begin. The administration has gone ahead and made quite a lot of appointments. The ministers have been appointed. The key people in CBN and Co have been appointed. EFCC, NSA, FIRS, and so on and so forth, different, and beginning to do its work. And it's moving on. The train is moving quite frankly. And but still, there's still starts a little bit of apprehension here and there. But the issues of NLC strike here and there, the issues of election tribunals and election debates and all that has not made government fully settle down. Well, I think that from this month and by December, everything will be in place and government will be moving. So far, one or two things that they have done looks okay. The removal of the subsidy, as painful as it is, for me, I think is a good thing. People are saying it wasn't a well-managed process. Palliatives and all that could have been planned in advance and all that. Me, I think we don't even need no palliatives for anything. We should just remove the subsidy and everybody should adjust to the new reality of living without subsidy and then begin to work well. What should have maybe done would have wasted time is that at least the refinery should be working before subsidy was removed, but we probably didn't have time for that because it takes a little while to get those ones working. But now they should try and get the refineries working so that there'll be cheaper alternatives to fuel instead of importing fuel into Nigeria. I think that is critical. One or two of the appointments I think are sound. Mr. Cardoso in CBN should be able to do quite a decent job. Wale Edu is a tried and tested hand in finance. I'm hoping that he can do well. Of course, other appointments have been political, you know, which is part of politics anyway. You play politics, you expect some kind of recognition or reward. Let's hope that they're able to do more than just being political and to actually perform and all that. I'm told that a few other people that are around we'll see. But I think the big elephant in the room is short and its effects on our economy. We may be taking one step forward, 2 steps backwards, because any form of progress that you want to make and any form of advancement that you want to make, if there's still elements of corruption in it here and there, it will be sabotaging itself, I think. So let's see how that is tackled and if it's going to be able to be tackled, and then we take it from there. So we're looking and seeing what the other appointments would be like, and but we yet do not have a clear direction and a clear ethos and a very well-rounded vision of what the administration wants to achieve. We're waiting and we're looking forward to that. And maybe in the next month or two, there'll be clarity now that feet are firmer on the ground. And then we'll take it from there. As for the political parties that did not succeed this time around, I think the parties need to now begin to replan, reposition, and re-strategize for what they want to do in the future. And everybody needs to be very realistic about the situation and the environment in Nigeria. And I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you very much for shedding a bit of light on how we should go. I want to take you up on a few things. You still seem to be thinking the government needs time to settle down to do what it needs to do. They've made some very serious policy pronouncements since they came in. And a lot of people have said these policies were not well thought through, because when those policies were challenged, you saw them flip-flopping, going back and forth. For instance, they've announced that student loan, consequent upon the removal of fuel subsidy, they announced and allowed states, I think Obasanjo signed that bill, for states to be able to generate electricity and do a couple of things. They have floated the Naira, saying that it will find its value. And we've seen Naira at an all-time high. You know, they don't seem to have a grasp.
I didn't get that. They said what will find its value.
The Naira, they floated the Naira. It was 700 and something when they came in, or was it, I mean, unofficial. Official was almost 400 and something, you know, when they came in. So they have done some major policy pronouncement, even before the government had time to settle down. Do you think that this is what the pattern will be going forward? Acting before coming back to think of the impact of those actions? Or are you still expecting them to come together, have a proper vision, like you said, and say, every action we take, this is the expectation, or this is what we expect? Do you think this government is capable of doing that?
Well, I'm surprised. The government should be capable of doing that. They seem to have some very good technocrats in the government who have been in government for a long time. And I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be well-planned and sure-footed, except, of course, if they spent a lot more energy trying to win the politics and trying to win the election. But part of what any serious political party should be doing is that as they are planning to win the election, they should have an engine at the back room that is working out policies so that they can hit the ground running. That's what happens in any other country. That's what happens in the UK. As a matter of fact, in the UK, you have a shadow cabinet of the alternative party or the opposition party that is functioning almost like the government itself, reviewing response, so that the day they win an election, they just move into office. It's like you almost have two governments operating in the UK. It's just that it is one that takes the decisions and the other is reviewing what is going on. In America, you have something almost similar, you know, although you don't have a shadow government as such, but you have a very, very active opposition that's very well involved and very well informed, and also has their own ideas and is very critical of what current government is doing. So to find that APC that was in government already and only took over from themselves, have a set of people that take over and they don't seem prepared, is a little bit surprising. To not really parties. We're not holding ourselves as parties. The party is not superior. We're still very individualistic in Nigeria, and still a little bit looking at things not from a real party perspective. You know, there should have just been a continuum, party to party, and it's just a question of changing a few of the actors. But be that as it may, this is where we have found ourselves. I think the one about fuel subsidy was even a speech by the president that was taking a little bit off guard. I'm not sure they really wanted to announce that fuel subsidy was ended that day. It was just a speech, you know, but somehow it took a life of its own. The press took it up, the people took it up, and it took a life of its own, and therefore government just had to react and keep moving. So that one I can even understand them not having thought it out well enough, although they should have been a campaign rhetoric for them. The student loan, I don't know how that came about, but I think it needs a lot more work to be done to know how it will function. I don't even see it as a critical campaign issue. We're trying to educate 20 million Nigerians that are out of school. The answer to that is not just a simple loan situation. It's one of the pillars, but we need a crisis. It's in a crisis. We need a bigger reaction to educating our children than just a student's loan. States to generate electricity, that's very, very welcome. It was something long in the works. It's an announcement, but you know that the fruits of that and the results of that and the outcomes of that is another 2 years down the line, because I'm sure some of the states were not expecting it, they were not prepared for it, and now is the time that they're going to do the hard work As for Naira being floated, I'm not even sure they have totally, fully floated the Naira. I still am told that the exchange rate with banks is not quite the same as what you find on the black market. I think there's still a disparity in those two rates at this point in time, and I stand to be corrected. I think what they are doing is managing the Naira and trying to systematically bring the two rates much closer together. And I think the fear where they didn't want to just float the Naira like that was also this fear of inflation and price changes, especially with regards to fuel, that might occur. So I think to some extent, the CBN or the NNPC is still buying fuel at some kind of bank-controlled rate. Maybe every other thing is on the black market and open. I'm not sure. I'm not there. But that's where we are. I think it is really, really time for us to know clearly what the administration is trying to achieve and what their emphasis is. All I know is that there is some monitoring unit, which is new and fresh, for the minister's performance, headed by Hadiza Bala Usman. And I hope that that unit will be able to do its work without fear or favor, and really have some kind of score sheet and some kind of profile and some kind of basis which will be open to everyone, by which they're going to assess the ministers and the heads of parastatals and assess their performance. If it's still shrouded in mystery and the basis of assessment is not clear, it will also be opened to manipulation and maneuvering. So I hope Hadiza can come up with something very clear, very precise, very measurable, that even the public can follow, so that at the end of the day, we know exactly how we're going to measure performance of our various ministers and things like that. And that will go to help with accountability in our country. I think one of the biggest problems we have in this country is lack of accountability by the people in charge of nation and resource. If this government can turn that around and make appointees and political office holders accountable to the people, and if the people can rise and challenge the performance of those who they have put into office in a scientific and clearly defined way, I think it will put people on their toes, and people will be able to respond to the yearnings of the general public. Right now, our leaders don't respond to the yearnings of the people. The people are slightly taken for granted, and it is what they serve you that you tend to accept, and you have no voice to respond to how you have been treated and whether you like it or not. And even so, sometimes even in elections, your votes don't seem to count, and that voice doesn't seem to ring. So these are the things we need to change in Nigeria to make sure that we have a very active, responsive, and performance-driven government.
Thank you, Pastor. This is what we've been trying to do in the ALG. I will take you up on that last bit of what you said. Government don't respond, and very true. They were trying to buy cars in the Senate, and the whole country was up in arms. They shouldn't buy it. Even if they were going to buy it, they should buy made in Nigerian cars, so that the foreign exchange, everything was going to be impacted. But obviously, they were not listening to us. And all of a sudden, the president sent a supplementary budget. And the budget was for cars. I don't know what's the emergency in buying cars and buying a yacht. And people were up in arms saying, we don't need this at this time. But still, they are going ahead to do what they want to do. How do we ensure that government responds to us? And you have said you hope that Hadiza Bala Mohammed will come up with some clear metrics for measuring these ministers. Do we leave that to her to do, or can a coalition of people come together and ensure she comes up with something? Because if everybody just say we hope she will do it, and if she doesn't do it, what happens? We are left in fluid. So what would you say? How can we ensure that, one, government responds to us? How can we then hold them, make sure that they come up with these metrics that will be a measurable index for them?
Well, you didn't appoint Hadiza Bala Usman in the first place.
Yes.
Her appointment is by the president, and she's
Okay.
reporting to the president.
Okay.
So she's not reporting to the public, as
Okay.
it were. You didn't appoint her. It wasn't your idea. So she must report to her boss who appointed her. If she decides to be gracious enough to allow you to see the window of her operations, that's grace, okay? You can't hold her, you know, but what I'm hoping is that we can appeal to her to show us, the public, the transparency of her process so that we can rely on the outcomes of her decisions, okay? But if she's doing what her master wants, then she's okay, as far as he's okay. But we, the public, have to now develop our own template. If it's in sync with what she's doing, fine. If it's not, then we need to listen, because at the end of the day, both president and her and the ministers report to us, the public, who are ostensibly through
Paying
votes
their salary,
have put
yeah.
them in power.
Exactly.
Yes, and put them in power and pay their salary.
Yeah.
You know, the hopelessness that a lot of Nigerians are feeling now is that their votes just don't count. And INEC didn't do a good job this last election round. They have not done a job that will bring about confidence in the average Nigerian that their votes actually count. They totally messed up the process they had defined for themselves. It's like this same thing we're asking Hadiza now. INEC, define the process for us. Let us understand it. Let us admit it. Let us agree with it. And they did so. And they swore and they beat their chest and said that this process they would follow to the letter. What happened on election day in February 21 or whatever that day was, the whole process collapsed completely. And then they now come back and tell us that they are not accountable to us, that they can do whatever they want, and the process they have chosen to go by, we should accept it and it's okay. We should just take it like that, which is where there's this feeling of foreboding right now with the average person that went out there to vote. They said, well, we do not quite think that you did what you said you would do, you know. And therefore, that is the challenge that everybody is having, you know. And that's where the public really has to now rise up, you know, and get their voice back and really be able to stand and find a system by which they can challenge government and processes in a way that you can put government on its toes. The first one is that your vote must count. So by the Nigerian populace must be taken on INEC, and INEC must give us a report and a feedback as to what really happened on that day, that the process that they said they were going to implement did not work, okay, especially for the presidential elections. Now they're already challenging Kogi and Bayelsa elections, saying that that same process failed. So there's a total loss of confidence by quite a lot of people in this system called INEC. One of the best things that this administration can do is to totally overhaul INEC if they can, if it is possible, if it is in their interest to so do, you know, and put in place both a process and a governance structure that is beyond controversial in terms of influence in any area. That is the starting building block for Nigerian democracy. The second building block is our constitution. This constitution needs to be looked at, debated, reviewed, discussed, analyzed by Nigerians, not by a small group of people, whether they be military apologists or not, who are throwing a constitution at us. It is not a constitution that says we the people. So there must be a serious constitutional conference. They've had one before. It came out with results, recommendations and all that. Government threw it under the gutter and under the bus. Any other country, it would have been a cause of uprising. That how can we discuss constitution we bring it to you. It's not debated. There's no white paper. You just keep it on the shelf. Who are we? It means that government, to a large extent, is really taking the people for granted. And we will never realize how much damage is being done, both to this nation and to the national psyche. There's some people who have left Nigeria who have sworn never to come back, okay? Because they are done with a country where there's no process. And also, there may seem to be a few right now, but the number is growing, okay? There are also some people who are becoming more and more aware who are saying that this kind of thing cannot continue. I had a new word yesterday. Some young people came and we were chatting and they said rootless Nigerians, rootless, root as in ROOTLES, Nigerians without roots, i.e. Nigerians that have escaped into the diaspora. They are not settled in diaspora. They're struggling and working hard and making money in diaspora and trying to make a living, but they're totally displaced and unsettled out of Nigeria and feel that they cannot make their way back to Nigeria and settle in Nigeria because Nigeria has been hostile to them. Nigeria has not been comfortable for them. Nigeria has not accepted a situation where and the rules that they should operate by. So they're neither here nor there, and they're a bit frustrated, and they're growing in number every day. You look around them everywhere, so on and so forth. And this is the situation in Nigeria at this point in time. So we need to somehow find a way by which we can take back ownership of Nigeria by the average Nigerian, whereby each Nigerian, big or small, rich or poor, small or in the rural areas or in the cities, has a voice that is accepted, recognized, respected, and responded to. Right now, that is not the situation. And that is the pain that a few Nigerians are feeling, and a few more will begin to feel as days begin to go by, if government does not try to respond to these needs.
Pastor, very well said. So I guess I will ask you the same question that you often ask our guests. So who will build a cat? How can we coalesce? How can we organize? Can you granulate it for us?
That's what ALG is trying to do.
Exactly. So let the people hear
That's what ALG is.
How can they be part of this movement?
That's what.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
That is fundamentally what the African Leadership Group is trying to do, not just in Nigeria, but all over Africa. Number one, to give each Nigerian a voice, okay? To really deepen democracy and make democracy work as it should, okay? If collectively we agree to bring our own country down, then let us collectively agree. If we all collectively agree to push the country forward, let us collectively agree. Let our lives and our decisions not be taken for us by just a group of people whose interests is not very clear, or who we believe are serving more of their own interests than the interests of the collectivity of Nigeria. So the voice of the Nigerian must be heard. Two, the Nigerian must be educated and well-informed. There are three reasons being heard at this point in time. The first reason is ignorance, okay? People are largely ignorant and uninformed and distanced from governance and from the people who rule them. A lot of people are in rural areas, just carrying on with their lives, and they don't care what goes on at state level or at federal government level. They don't care. They just hear announcements from time to time. They're not even sure how those announcements affect them. They just keep struggling and struggling to make a living and struggling and end up their life struggling. And a lot of them die without knowing that life could indeed have been better. They don't even understand what government is doing. Some of them think that all government needs to do is to provide roads and provide schools and so on and so forth. And they can't relate the lifestyle of government and governors and heads of states and ministers to the poverty that they are feeling. Some of them just think that that is how life is. So they are largely ignorant. They don't even understand what it is to hold government accountable. Okay, these days of social media, from time to time, you see one or two people crying. You know, I saw some people in those states, the roads were totally washed up. One guy was wearing a white jacket. He went into the mud and he was crying. And it's like a lone voice in the wilderness, and nobody really understands what he's doing. And everybody's just moving on. You know, I saw a guy, they told me he brought some yams from somewhere. He had been through 7 or 8 tariffs in a state, wailing all over the place that this can't continue and all that. So they're just pockets of action, but there's no focus and direction that's telling people what they are really going through. So the people need to be informed and educated. So the first problem is ignorance, okay? And in some parts of Nigeria, ignorance has been totally weaponized. They deliberately keep the people ignorant. They keep the people poor so that they don't have a voice and they cannot talk, okay? The second is what I call the conspiracy of the elites or the influential people, okay? There's some Nigerians that are influential, some Nigerians that have understanding, some Nigerians that are in a better position to know better, but they've all have conspired to silence, okay, for whatever reason. Some of them are protecting their interests largely. Some of them cannot be bothered. Some of them just want to carry on with their lives and just to be left alone and all that. So those people are the people who are taking quite a lot of the decisions on the behalf of others. And some don't even rightly or wrongly know right from wrong, wrong from right. They just want to get on with their lives, okay? Again, some of them know better, but they've decided that this course of action is more convenient and more suitable for themselves. So there's that group of people also who are driving Nigeria in a certain direction. And then there's a third group who have taken hold of Nigeria, who understand things, who know what they want, and who are driving Nigeria in the direction that they want. And this is where they're dragging everybody and also and all that. The only challenge with that group is that largely what they're doing is for their own self-interest, not to be.
Faye and Uncle Lulu, can you please check on Mr. President's network and maybe turn off his video? The bandwidth is low.
Yeah, but he can't turn it off. It's okay. He will soon come back on answer.
And I think in continuing that conversation, you know, one of the things, just following up on Mr. President's last statement about education, and that's where we all come in, right? Because institutions are human beings. Human beings are the ones that build these institutions. And so it's also human beings that would dismantle these institutions. So this is where we come up. This is why we have this conversation. This is why ALG exists, for us to also be informed and begin to dismantle those institutions that do not benefit us as a nation. The stealing of votes, it wasn't machines that did that. Those were human beings. Those were Nigerians that did that. So how do we change our mindset, you know, and how do we begin to work in the interest of Nigeria over self? How do we, and I think that's what's really hopeful, because this is where we can begin to change that narrative that we do have the power, we are educated, we come on this platform every Thursday, we've heard different thought leaders, we've gotten more insight. I personally have learned a lot just from being part of this organization and this platform, and we are more informed. So how do we move forward? And that's the hope that we have, because the power is really in our hands, is not in the hands of those that hold us hostage. The video we just watched said it all. And so that, I think that's part of why we do what we do, to continue to support each other, to empower each other, to know that we are the ones that can take back Nigeria, and for Nigeria to be that country that it is destined to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the next level of conversation, Princess, I see your hand. We will get to you when we start. So let me just acknowledge that. But absolutely, Jumoke, I totally agree with you, and that's why we are on this platform. We'll take the conversation to really, how do we fix things to move us to the next level? What is our role as individuals, as a community, as a group? What can we do? And that's where we really need to coalesce and begin to organize. But I would leave Mr. President when he comes back, because I have had conversation with a few people, and all of you on the platform, I just want to put it out there that for Nigeria to move forward and for us to really hold government accountable, we need the coming together of the middle class and all. So there should be a coalition of the middle class, because right now the middle class in Nigeria is even being wiped out. There should be a coming together of all the professional bodies, NMA, the Lawyers Association, and all the various bodies that are suffering the harsh effect, ASU and what have you. And then we should have all the NGOs as well coming together to set an agenda. And Pastor mentioned something about something like a shadow cabinet that they have in the UK. We need
Pastor
to...
is back.
Okay, Pastor is back. All right, Pastor, you're welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, this is technology.
Nigerian network. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so you have talked a lot about, what we need to do.
Well, it happens everywhere. It happens everywhere.
It happens in the US also, but not in Ireland. You've talked on education and
it happens everywhere. It happens in Ireland too. Maybe only in Ireland.
That's true. We've had power cuts here, so I agree it happens. We have power cuts and all those things. So, what?
You've had power cuts in Ireland?
Yeah. Yeah. When there's a rain, there's a storm. The only thing is that it's restored almost immediately. And okay, so we want to move on.
I was in Greece last week too, and they had power cuts where I was.
Yeah, but I'm sure there was a storm or there was rain or something.
Go ahead.
There must be a reason for it.
Yeah, there was a bit of a storm.
Yeah,
there was a bit of a storm. Yeah.
Okay, Pastor. We are saying that the people are largely ignorant, and so they cannot hold government accountable. Government have weaponized poverty. You mentioned the conspiracy of the elites. You mentioned a group holding Nigeria hostage and holding the government hostage. I have had conversation with a few people, and they are saying the way to really, really hold government accountable is for the middle class and all professional associations, including NGOs, come together and form something like what we call a shadow cabinet that will mirror every ministry, every area, what we want government to do, and then mobilize the people through all these organizations if they will buy in. So labor can be part of it, but we will individually, because the doctors are suffering, the lawyers are suffering, the lecturers are suffering, everybody is suffering. But government is not listening to us. And the poor are too poor to take action against government. So those of us that are aware the middle class in quotes, if they still exist in Nigeria. He said, if they come together and agree to coalesce, we can then galvanize the poor who will see us as their leaders in the middle, because they cannot get to the top. At least they can reach us in the middle and they would unite with us. What do you think about that idea? Because individual groups and organizations working like ALG is doing, we can make a little scratch, but not enough dent to get the entire system changed. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, that's a good idea, and it's something that should be considered. But the challenge is that over the years,
yes,
and by experience in Nigeria, it has been extremely difficult to drive such a movement. I was talking to a Nigerian elder the other day that what do we do about Nigeria? And he said in Yoruba, "Iyayo itito," meaning that the suffering is not enough. People have not suffered enough. So they've not really been pushed to the wall. And as long as people are still tolerant of this sort of thing, it will continue to happen. I was very surprised when on it. I probably realized that he was telling the truth. The second is that who will bail the cat? You know, there have been many attempts. Even this last week, Labour tried to do riot or whatever it was they were trying to do. The thing didn't have head, didn't have tail, didn't start, didn't stop, was even aborted in between. First of all, the reason for which they wanted to riot was a bit silly, you know, in the first place. And then they wanted to bring us to a standstill for that. So it was almost dead on arrival, but they still couldn't push it through. They couldn't push it through because of the force of government. Government in Nigeria and in parts of Africa is so strong and controls so much of the resource that it's easy for them to break ranks. So people gather together, they talk together, they want to do things, this and that. I can assure you that it is from the midst of those people that one of them will go overnight and go and tell governments everything that is being said. Even on this platform, as we are discussing, there are many people from various parts of government who are on this platform, who by the time we finish this meeting, some people
all right.
Did we lose him again?
Yeah, we have lost him again.
And Oga level 2, I think, you know, we continue that conversation. You know, Mr. President just said something that even amongst those that have planned these, I don't know if it's a riot or a protest, it's Nigerian. Okay, he's back.
That's what is back.
Okay, finish your points. Let's hear what you are trying to say.
I was just following up on your statement that from amongst those that do the protest or riots, and they have how would I say, spies, or those that would, as they would say in the US here, sell out. And we were talking before, when you were off the other time, that institutions are made by people. So it is us Nigerians that need to dismantle those institutions that are not favorable. And I shy away from us pointing to government, because who is the government, right? Who are the people that are in those offices? They are Nigerians. So how do we really get to the root cause of what makes us who we are? How do we change that? And we talk about that a lot, about the reorientation of the mind of the average Nigerian. How do we get ourselves, how do we reset that mind to go back to one Nigeria, put a country above self? So that was just my contribution.
It's a very difficult task, Jumoke, and that is why hitherto it has not been successful. You know, there are many things battling Nigeria. First of all, there's nothing really like Nigeria ab initio. That's the truth. Okay, I've been reading a book by a guy called Max Silwan, what Britain did to Nigeria. And I would like to recommend that book very seriously to every Nigerian, so that first of all, you understand your history, you understand your background. There's nothing called Nigeria in the first place. It is a creation of the British. It's a creation. The British created Nigeria out of nothing. There's nothing homogeneous about us. There's no ethos bringing Nigerians together as Nigerians. There's no such thing. Nigerians came about for British interest, and British, first of all, slave interest, and then secondly, trade interest, okay? The most important element in Nigeria in the 17th and 18th century and early parts of the 19th century was a company called the Royal Niger Trade Company, which is now called the UAC. They're still here in Nigeria. And it was run by a certain gentleman, Lord Goldie, who amalgamated about 4 companies together to form this company to trade in Nigeria, trading with Nigerian monarchs, kings, the Jaja of Opobo, tried to trade with Overame of Benin, and so on and so forth. And anytime any of these people resisted his trade terms or entities, they will move in and use of gun and so on and so forth to dispose or depose the so-called monarch and take over the trade there. And it is that now brought in the British government into Nigeria, mainly to protect British trade and to prevent French incursion, also for trade into this area of Africa that was rich in agricultural produce, rich in minerals, rich in human capacity and human power, and rich also in artifacts and elephant tusks and ivory and things like that. That is what the British initially wanted from Nigeria before the discovery of oil and so on and so forth. So this whole enterprise was put together for British interest. What is missing in Nigeria is that the enterprise has not now been able to sit together with itself and create a Nigerian interest, okay, which will be at crossroads with the British interest that founded Nigeria. So some of the British people and some of the Americans have been actively involved in Nigeria and ensuring that Nigeria continues to remain, to some extent, able to produce and protect British interests. And because of that, the fundamental elements that would make Nigeria a nation have been scattered, you know. One of the things that was used as a weapon in this last election was ethnicity, okay? And ethnicity was introduced fundamentally, or let me say, encouraged by the British, you know. And as long as Nigerians continue to think of themselves as ethnically divided, they cannot unite to face a common enemy. And now let us divide and separate, okay? They will not also allow themselves to divide and separate because some people are getting certain interests from other parts of Nigeria, which they will lose if there was that separation. So you are neither bat nor bird. You are stuck in between. So what is needed, and part of what ALG needs to do, is a total reorientation and a total rediscussion among Nigerians. Do we even want this entity called Nigeria? And if we want this entity called Nigeria, which was a name given to us by Goldie and Flora Shaw, okay? Nobody came together in these groups of people and said, we want to be called Nigeria. No, we were told what we were going to be called, okay? We were named as a child by the parents that gave birth to us, okay? Flora Shaw was Goldie's girlfriend. She became Lord Lugard's girlfriend and then married Lord Lugard. So that triangle gave us our name between Goldie, Flora Shaw, and Lord Lugard, okay? And forced us together for mainly British economic interest and nothing else. Everything we have gotten has been by the side and on the way. So now that we've been forced together, it is not too late for us to discuss whether, number one, we want to remain together. Number two, if we want to remain together, under what terms we want to remain together, and what will now be in our own best or better interest as Nigerians. We still have shied away, or we have been discouraged, or we have been dissuaded, or we have been prevented by all sorts of machinations from having that discussion. And unless you have that discussion, there really can be no progress, because everybody will feel slightly unfairly treated and slightly disadvantaged and slightly so that seed of distrust among the ethnic groups is there. And where there's distrust, there cannot be unity. And when there's no unity, there cannot be progress. It's as simple as that. So this is Nigeria 101. And until we really, really look at ourselves and agree that this is a venture worth pursuing, we're honestly wasting our time. And as much as it might not be to everybody's advantage, maybe everybody should go to their tents. But that discussion is difficult to have. So we're stuck between and betwixt. And in the middle of that, people are raping Nigeria, getting the bounty and the fruits thereof, enjoying themselves, and making away with our collective patrimony, both Nigerians and external people. You heard the guy on the video who said, it is not we Europeans that are stealing from Nigeria. It is Nigerians that are stealing from Nigeria and selling or giving to us Europeans, which is almost exactly the same thing that has been happening since 17-something, okay? Nigerian leaders steal Nigerian slaves, sell to British people. Nigerian leaders take Nigerian produce, make their dash or their kolango on top of it, and give to British people. Nigeria 101 is still going on until tomorrow. See what happened in Niger recently when the young men took over Niger, which is also a product, the French version of Nigeria. The same River Niger, Niger, Negro. You know, Nigeria used to be called Slave Coast. That was Nigeria's name originally. This area, especially western or southwestern Nigeria, it was called Slave Coast. Ghana was called Gulf Coast. Ivory Coast is still called Ivory Coast till tomorrow, because most of what they got from Ivory Coast was elephant tusks and ivory, some of which they got from Nigeria, and gold, which they got from Ghana, and Nigeria, slaves, which we got from Nigeria. That's why T.G. Tate says he's a Nigerian, really, because when he did his ancestry, he came from Igbo land or somewhere like that. And I can tell you that 40 to 50% of the Afro-Americans in the Caribbean and in America are probably Nigerians, because that was the biggest commodity until William Wilberforce changed that process and created places like Sierra Leone and Liberia. That's why most Sierra Leoneans are actually Nigerians, okay? They have Nigerian names, Feni, Tokumbo, all those sort of names, because most of them were Nigerian slaves that were deported into Sierra Leone. This is the history of this place called West Africa and Nigeria that we're all battling for. And we still have not sat down to discuss these things and decide in which way we're going. You can be sure that the British don't want Nigeria to really be united. The Americans, the same thing. It's not to their advantage. It's not to their interest. So whatever they do with the IMF, World Bank, and all that is begging the question. So until we really sit down and discuss all these things, we are not going to be at peace. You are the bird on the wire. The wire is upset. The bird is not comfortable. And unless we really talk about these things and face the reality of Nigeria, we'll continue to have this same sort of situation that we have found ourselves in. But all is not bad, because I'm a man of faith. I believe in God. I see the hand of God in all these things that is happening, and God has a master plan. All we need to do as Africans is to try and find out that plan, key into it, and make it work, to the advantage of Nigeria. That man said it also. He says there's soon going to be a war between the Africans and the Europeans, okay? And there's that preparation for war. And it's a real war for full and total independence back as well. Where I was talking about Niger. The guy took over, and the columbite or bauxite or cobalt or whatever it is that they used to sell to the French at $11, they are now selling at $200 or 200 euro, whatever it is. Okay, so for years and years and years, the French have been raping not just Niger, but Ivory Coast, but Dahomey, but Senegal, and all those places. So much so that till tomorrow, the French central bank controls the central bank of most of these countries, and just keep taking their resources. Most of Europe was built on the back of African resource. I traveled recently to Greece and to London, and a young girl that I just met recently that's helping me with some of our medical things and my wife's foundation here and there. I said to her, I was traveling. She said, please bring back something for me. I said, what do I bring back? She says, bring back chocolates for me from Europe. And I smiled to myself and I said, what an irony. What an irony. How can we as Africans still think that chocolates come from Europe, where they don't have a single cocoa tree, one single cocoa tree? It cannot grow in. It's like thinking that apples or apple juice comes from Nigeria. It's such an irony. There's no such thing. Every single bar of chocolate that is built in Switzerland, which is reputed to be the chocolate capital of the world, came from Ivory Coast or Ghana or Nigeria or at the very worst, Brazil. Is somebody listening to what I'm saying? I looked at the Queen's crown the other day, and I was surprised to find out that almost nothing on that crown came from Britain. The diamond came from South Africa, most likely. The gold came from South Africa or Ghana or somewhere like that. The velvet probably came from India or somewhere like that. The silk, almost the same, you understand? And this is how Europe was and is being built, on the back of West African and African resource. Slaves went into Caribbean sugarcane plantations to cultivate sugarcane for the British and the Americans. They did the same thing with cotton. The cotton farms in America were pioneered and driven by African slaves, okay? The bananas in Mauritius and Seychelles and places like the same thing with slaves from Africa and so on and so forth. So a lot of the agricultural resource outside of Europe itself, and even within Europe and America, were developed with African labor, and they made this place extremely powerful. These things are historical things that the African now needs to wake up, and even if they cannot get reparations, need to begin to reverse, because the internet, the social media, information, education has made all these things available to us. Okay, so this is really what the ALG is trying to do, to redirect and reorientate the African mind, the average African mind, to let us know that we are not our own enemies. We should be our own friends and work together to emancipate the African for the benefit of Africa, okay? And for the benefit of the world. Because if Africa is emancipated, the world will be a better place. There'll be much more resource available for people to enjoy, and there'll be better terms of trade. Even the recessions in Europe now will be reversed with better understanding, and people will be able to interact a little bit better. You know, people don't understand all these things, that more for all of us is more for me. And that's the thinking we should begin to sell to the world. It's nothing personal. Nobody is saying that nobody shouldn't aspire to position or to political office or to authority. People are just saying, let us make life much better for the majority and not for the minority. That's all. How do we sit together and make life much, much better for the majority and not just life enjoyable for a few minority? After all, everything you have on this earth, we are going to live back to this earth. You know, one bishop from Greece, or I don't know where he came from, with white beard, spoke something very powerful the other day. He says, life is transient, and we're all here for a short time. He says, if you look at Augustus Caesar, was worshipped in Rome almost as a god. But a few centuries down the line, where's Augustus Caesar? Where's Alexander the Great? Where's Napoleon? Even coming nearer home, where is Otto von Bismarck? And where is Adolf Hitler? All of them have disappeared like smoke, as though they never existed. Some of them will still feel a bit of their influence, but today, there's nothing they can do. That the minute a man dies, his authority totally dies. The man that you were struggling with, let us not displease Papa. Let us not annoy Uncle. Let us
all right, Pastor.
Our president.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm sorry. You really touched an angle that you can be here. I'll preach a sermon, collect offering.
I know.
The pastoral spirit comes up.
I know the pastoral spirit. Look, we have touched on a few things, and I know that what we really want to look at is the way forward and how can people take positive actions that we need to move this country forward. Some people have argued that the British have left us over 60 years ago. Like that guy said, I think our problem now is we ourselves. So let's leave that aside and say, okay, how do we move forward? I'm going to be handing over to Jumoke, who will take over the questioning and get the people to be part of this conversation. What steps do we need to take? How can we all get involved? A lot of people are already involved, but we need more people so that we can get traction. You know, Jumoke, you will take over, you will coordinate the questions and answers, and then you will put in some of your own questions.
Okay. Thank you. And before we start taking questions, I just want to follow up on your comments, Mr. President, on faith. And thank you for giving us the background and the history of Nigeria. It's always a good thing to reflect on the past so that we know where we are right now and where we are headed. And but the question I want to pose to you is, after the British left, Nigeria did work. And you're a product of Nigeria. Most of us here today in products of that Nigeria that worked. So something worked in Nigeria, even though we were strapped together by our colonial masters. But for a period of time, we had a great nation that was recognized as the giant of Africa. We had a nation that produced the best of the best, and still they are the best of the best around the world in terms of intellectual capacity, in terms of resources. Nigerians are still that, and this is the product of our community or our society. And even before then, if you even go back to even the slave trade, if you read the history of the enslaved people that contributed to the development of the Americas, a lot of them are traced to Africa. So that is just what is in our DNA. It worked, and so we can't really now hold on to the colonial masters forcing us together. We are here. And the politicians come together irrespective of their tribe, and they work together to continue to oppress Nigerians. So how do we Nigerians get past our ethnic divide, our religious divide, our even status divide, and say we are Nigerians first? Because it worked back in the 60s, in the 70s, as far back as I can remember. So I want us to kind of maybe look at that and move forward, that this is possible. That Nigeria is possible. That great Nigeria is possible. It has happened before.
Well, I beg to disagree with you that Nigeria didn't work for one day. We got the so-called independence in 1960, and from that day, crisis started in Nigeria. Even the independence that we got was gotten on a very, very shaky and false and electorally manipulated foundation. You know, first of all, the census was manipulated, okay, saying that we had more people in the north than in the south. Secondly, the way by which the elections were conducted was such that the people who are the majority could not form a government easily, because the people who had the minority in terms of vote number had more seats in parliament than the people who had the majority of the votes. So everything was skewed from day one to make sure that there was no equity, there was no fairness, the voice of the majority was not quite heard. So from day one, the foundation was destroyed and shaky. And the people who created that foundation knew that it was not working, and it would not work without their consistent influence and supervision, which is what led to the crisis of 1966, that the military boys came in. If Nigeria was working and peaceful and everybody was enjoying the elections and there was no wet here, there was no demo, there was no dissatisfaction ab initio with the results of the election, there would have been peace. So we just had a fragile association, you know, on eggshells that we were managing. What you mean by Nigeria worked was that the economy seemed to be a bit more stable and a bit more predictable in terms of the exchange rate. That was all that was working. Okay.
The education system worked, healthcare worked.
No, the education system was begun by Awolowo, but not perfected. It was still working on it, and they sabotaged it, even till tomorrow. And there was no such thing in the north. It wasn't working. It wasn't working. And they were struggling in the southeast. And when Awolowo started using money from the treasury to do free education, the British masters started fighting him. Go and read your history. They said, that's not what we left that money in the treasury for. Why are you doing free education? So it was a battle, okay? And he couldn't get the right kind of educational standards that he wanted. He forced it through. It was work in progress, and they truncated it even till tomorrow. It's not working, okay? So Nigeria never really worked, okay? It was just a little tad better than where we've now found ourselves. But this is the natural trajectory that would have found ourselves based on the way by which Nigeria was founded. The distrust was created from day one. Igbo don't trust Yoruba. Yoruba don't tolerate Hausa. Hausa fight Igbo, and so on and so forth. Everything for British interests. They knew it couldn't work without reference to them. And therefore, very soon, they tried Awolowo for treasonable felony. It was inspired, it was instigated. So where was it working? Where all that confusion was in there? Where did they really settle down for one day to have good and progressive governance? And when they saw that Western Nigeria seemed to be moving and making some things in spite of all the confusion, then they came against it and scattered the whole thing and drove it back into some kind of whirlwind, you know. And if
But we can
anybody
rise
say that,
above all that now, right? We can rise above that now.
that is the challenge. The challenge now, Jumoke, is how to get Nigerians to rise above that. But the first thing is that not many Nigerians even realize what they're up against. They're not informed. They're not educated. Even most of this thing I'm telling you now, I've had to do the research, stumble on some of the information, and come at it because I kept on wondering for a long time why Nigeria was not working, why Nigeria was in such a turmoil, why certain people were in charge of the army and some people were not there, why there was a civil war, why there was all this mishmash. People just think that that is how it is. If you don't go to the root of a thing, you cannot solve the problem.
That is true.
You understand?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Not very many Nigerians know the root of Nigeria's problem. Because our history was rewritten or written for us to British advantage. Till tomorrow, we think Jaja of Opolwo was a tyrant.
Yeah.
We think Overame was a badly behaved king. That is what you were taught in school.
Yeah.
We think Mungo Park discovered the Niger and Richard Clapperton was a hero that did this and that. But that's not the history. The real history was that Overame was exiled defending his own interest and the interest of his people. Yeah. The real history was that Jaja of Opobo was exiled defending his interest. He wasn't a tyrant. He was standing up for himself and his people. But today, if you go to America where you are, you ask about the American Indians, what you get is that these are badly behaved, cannibalistic people who just wanted to destroy white men. No, that's not the real truth. The truth is that they were defending their land, that these white people were trying to take over. If they did it in a crude scheme, but these people brought guns and horses and shot at these people and killed them until tomorrow. They've put them in camps and communes
reservations
and fed them with drugs and alcohol.
And
reservation or whatever you call
yeah.
it.
And
Why should those people be in
day,
reservations in 2023?
Yeah. Even our modern day, people like Saruwiwa are still considered.
Look at it now. If you go to Australia, you find the same thing. Aborigines are cultural heritages in Australia. Sorry?
I said even people like Saruwiwa, modern
Aborigines,
day,
if you go to Australia, they use them for cultural display.
Yeah.
Saruwiwa, they vilified him. They turned him into a villain. No, he was defending the interests of his people. But whatever it is, villain, whatever. He was defending the interests of his people. They've rewritten history.
Yeah.
And we're all mentally displaced. English law is the law we go by in Nigeria. As though before the English people came, we had no laws. Today, you want to get married, you have 2 weddings, customary marriage, or maybe 3, customary marriage, what do you call it, registry marriage, and white wedding. Customary traditional marriage. There's no such thing. But our mentation tells us, I saw a picture recently of a English wedding and a Nigerian so-called traditional marriage. And they said both of these marriages are traditional marriages. Why do we think that until we wear a white gown and wear a suit and go to church, you have not really fully married? Why? Why have we assumed the British culture as why am I wearing a shirt in Africa and not a bubu and not an agbada or something? Why? Because my mind has told me that this is good corporate dress. And even lucky I'm not wearing a tie today because I'm beginning to rebel in my mind that I don't need to wear all these things. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes.
Nigeria didn't work for one day. It was just economically better than this because it was serving at that time the economic interest of the British. Now they have combined with some of our leaders to destroy our economy so that it can still continually better serve them. That's all. What we need to do is to wake up and smell the coffee. And that's what ALG is simply trying to do, to wake Nigerians up so that they can smell the coffee and know that our enemies are not ourselves. Before the British came, we traded amongst ourselves in peace. There were some intertribal wars, no doubt. I mean, territory conquest and whatever it was, normal, like they had among the Saxons and the Anglo-Saxons and the Tudor family and everything. Everywhere in the world, people fight wars for different reasons.
We have 7 hands up, so maybe we should start taking questions because I know this is a very engaging conversation, one that probably would talk for the next few hours. So let's take some hands. Do you want to do the traditional way of taking 3 questions at a time? And so we have Princess Susan Oyewumi and we have Tola Obiyemi. I'll take those. Please go ahead, Susan, and then we'll take one more. We'll take 3 at a time, and then we have Mr. Bayo. So please go ahead, Princess Susan, with your question.
Good evening, sir. My question here is, what can be done to draw the hearts of the government to either forcefully or gently hear the voices of the masses in order to curtail the rapid increase and cost of living that is biting hard into the economy? That is the first. And the second question is, sir, if you were made the president of Nigeria, what will you put right to eradicate? Those are my 2 questions, sir. Thank you very much.
I missed the second one.
That if Princess Susan, do you want to repeat your question? That if you were president of Nigeria,
The second one.
Yeah. Okay. Susan, do you want to repeat your second question? Okay, I think her second question was about the economy. How would you address the economy? I think that's what I got from her second question.
Okay.
And then let me try to unmute her. She said she wasn't able to unmute. So, okay, Susan, please go ahead with your second question. I've unmuted you.
My second question is, if you were made the president of Nigeria, sir, what will you put right and what will you eradicate?
Thank you.
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
Obiyemi, please go ahead with your question.
Good afternoon.
Just make it. Now, I
Okay.
want to join the next small. Okay, to see what I'm doing now.
Sorry, there's a background noise.
Those kind of small things.
I'm going to mute everyone. Just
what do we do now? Those the rice. Do you understand? Those kind of small things.
okay. Sorry about that. I've muted everyone just to get rid of that background noise. Let me unmute you, Mr. Obiyemi, and so you can ask your question. Give me 1 second. Okay, I've asked you to unmute. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I can't see Pastor again.
Yeah, his video is off, but go ahead with your question.
Okay, fine. The speaker last week talked about, he was just trying to tip us that when I asked him about the refinery, especially the relationship between Nigeria and Belgium and how we can influence that. I was basically talking about the refinery last week, and he said that he heard somebody told him or whisper that they are not happy we are working on our refinery and they are trying their best to make sure that it doesn't work. I mean, this is what Pastor has been saying. And Pastor is saying that we should smell the coffee, we should wake up. And in my mind, I'm like, our leaders go to these same people anytime they want to do election to endorse them. Then when they get into government, we go to them for World Bank money loan. And we want to do economic reform, we invite them to come and speak. We go to them for solution, for policy and all. So they are all wrapped around us. Can we honestly do without these people? The way the economic system of the world is built. For instance, they cut us off. IMF decide not to deal with us again. Nigeria is going to be into a lot of trouble. So they've designed it in such a way that it's so difficult for us to disconnect from them. Disconnecting from them will mean that the masses will suffer, just like we saw in the subsidy and some other things. I just want him to tell us how we can disconnect from these people and still stand in this 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bayo, please go ahead with your question. And if I could just ask you to please go to the point so we can take more. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good evening, Pastor Floretta. The session today
How are you, Bayo?
Very fine, sir. Very good. This session reminds me of a few days before I traveled. I was in your office and we had this conversation about politics that was unending, interesting, and it was as if it shouldn't end. Thank you, sir. Okay.
You're my son. I was in London last week. Sorry, I didn't call you.
Yeah, I got the flyer late. I think I got it on Saturday or so. So I couldn't make it. That's fine, sir. Yeah. All right, sir. Thank you, sir. So my question is, sir, there are a few voices like you in Nigeria. Chief Atedo Peter side constantly talking about politics and things that needs to be done. People like you, I mean, everybody that listens to you knows that you know what is happening and you know what we need to do. I think the solution really, because the topic today talks about moving Nigeria to the next level. I think that the solution really must be institutional. There must be an institutional drive, or coalition of Nigerians to move Nigeria forward. And I would say that the biggest organization in Nigeria or institution in Nigeria right now, apart from the political institution, is the religious institution. So I'm asking, is there a way the religious bodies or institutions can come together in terms of educating the people and, a call for action, basically? Or is it just enough to pray and go to bed? That's my question. That's number one. The second question is, I think I'm beginning to sense that there's a cultural angle to these political problems, where a few people say that this government will favor me and my family. So if the government favors you, or if things are going bad and you're able to build a house or buy a car, then the government is good, regardless of what happens to other people, regardless of the injustice, regardless of the killings, regardless of kidnappings or what is happening or whatever it is. So I'm saying, is there a way we can, have a cultural shift that talks about, taking care of the welfare of totality of Nigerians, or the greater good for the greater number of Nigerians, promoting that agenda of oneness and greater good for all? I mean, that's the second question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So do you want to take
Thank you
those?
very much.
And then we have about...
Let me take those questions before I lose the trend of thought. And most of the questions are saying almost the same thing. Susan Oyewumi says, what can be done to draw the hearts of government to curtail the cost of living? Very little, to be honest, if you ask me. We can continue to agitate on a daily basis, point them to what we're saying and what we want and all that. And by the way, most of these things they already know. What is missing and what has been missing from most governments, I'm yet to see if this new government will be different, is a response to the needs of the people. They just simply don't respond. They don't respond. They don't take the people seriously. they take care of themselves first. Okay, if people were serious about responding to people's needs, the first thing that legislators should be thinking about is not buying SUVs. Most of them already have vehicles of one sort or the other. Some may be good, some may not be good, but they shouldn't be thinking first of taking care of themselves, which is the natural ethos of these people. So we'll continue to agitate, we'll continue to talk, we'll continue to grumble and complain, and then we'll continue to hope that our votes will count. But that's about it. They know everything about the cost of living. They know everything about the hardship. It's just that they operate in a slightly different economy from where we operate, where most things are provided for them. They don't worry about diesel. They don't worry about electricity. They don't worry about even foreign exchange to spend. They go up and down because they spend most of the resource for their own comfort. So as long as they're okay, it's all right. They know. So that's all. They know everything. They were once on this side, okay, not a few days ago. Now they're on the other side. They've quickly forgotten. So we need to remind them that we're still on this side and things are not easy. If I was made president of Nigeria, what will I do or what will I think of doing to put the economy right? The first thing is that Nigeria must feed itself. Nigeria must feed itself. Somebody was asking a similar question. All this IMF and all this World Bank, blah, 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 we cannot do without them. We can do without them if we stare them in the face and if we dare them. We have more than enough resources in Nigeria to feed ourselves. Before the British came in the 17th and 18th century, we were feeding ourselves. We were very happy. We were comfortable. We were eating what we grew. We were growing what we ate. Nobody was starving. Okay. So we didn't have schools like Oxford and Eton and things like that, but we were blissfully ignorant. We didn't need them. Everybody did what they wanted. And those fundamentals have not changed. So the first thing Nigeria must do is that Nigeria must feed itself. We must not import one grain of any kind of food into this country. That will save us tons of foreign exchange, okay? And the only thing we should even import are equipments and machinery to process in the fastest way possible what we already grow. So these chocolates I was talking about earlier on, why shouldn't Nigeria or Ghana be the chocolate capital of the world? The cocoa grows here. So why don't we process the chocolates and let everybody come here to buy our chocolates and so on and so forth? So Nigeria and Africa must feed itself. Number two, Nigeria must educate itself and get as much knowledge as possible. That was the area where we were most deficient, education and technology, which is what the British used to overcome us. They had superior technology in terms of firepower, not in terms of human being to human being and physical strength, no. But they had superior technology in terms of cannons, in terms of guns, in terms of firepower. And that is how they became our colonial masters. Now, technology is available everywhere. I read the story recently of a man in the East, maybe he's about 90 years old now, who was processing gasoline for planes using palm oil in the war, okay? Recently, Burma or Malaysia or somewhere like that did something like that. They called it a technological breakthrough. But poverty, need, war, fear, anxiety drove the Easterners to their productive best in that they were doing things that people thought were impossible. So now that internet is there, you talk to Siri, you talk to Google, you talk to whoever, they will tell you how to make a gun. We need to, or make a machine or make whatever. Nigerians need to take hold of their technology. And now that we are taking hold of IT, you can see how brilliantly well the Nigerian mind is doing in the place of information technology and AI. Some of the best minds in that thing are Indians, Chinese, and Nigerians. Okay. So China simply stole or took the technology of America, and they have become the technology capital of the world. Okay. Why can't Nigeria do the same in this day and age? So that's what we need to do. So we'll educate ourselves. We will feed ourselves. We will produce what we already have naturally into finished goods and sell them to the world. These two things will transform Nigeria. You understand? And then make sure that we have power to do these things and build roads so that we can access our raw materials. The rest will take care of itself. You understand? And that's what I will focus on as president of Nigeria, building infrastructure for production and make sure we produce and we consume, and what we have left, we sell to the world. If Nigeria was instead of producing, consuming, we won't be bothering ourselves with foreign exchange. If we didn't have to send our children to schools in England and America, we'll be saving a whole ton of foreign exchange. But we can educate those children here. They don't need to go anywhere to get educated because education is freely available now. And that's what we need to do to change our mindset and save ourselves tons of money. If you know how much money Nigeria spends educating children abroad, you'll be amazed. Even in Ghana, we're spending money educating our children there. Why can't we educate all those children here? What is stopping us from doing that? And invite the Americans and the British to come here and give us the education we want. Or we go and we have enough Nigerian professors all over the world who will come back and give our children sound education. And information is available, as I said, all over the place. These days of robotics and everything. And we're still in the dark ages. So that's what I would do. Tola spoke about refinery. Not happy that we're working. Of course, they will not be happy we're working on our refinery. Because if we're working on our refinery, it means that we will not buy things from their own refinery. I mean, I didn't want to say this, but you've put your hands in my mouth. Who does that? Where we produce oil here and we send it to Europe or America to be refined, and then we import petrol. The same thing we're doing with cocoa and chocolates. We're doing with oil and petrol. And it's convenient for those people because we're creating employment there. Why can't we create the employment here? They will sabotage all our refineries, and they do it. And we collude with them to do it. So we just have to ensure that we can disconnect from them in this our 21st century. Bio was talking about religious institutions. And I dare say that even though I'm a man of the cloth and I'm a pastor or whatever, it is our religious institutions that are one of our biggest problems. Because the way Nigeria will not unite is the way religious institutions, at least in Christianity, will not unite. And as long as they are competing and not uniting, we'll continue to have these problems. But the truth of the matter is that the institutions themselves are ignorant of most of the things I have said today. When I first became born again and I was a pastor in a certain church in Nigeria, the first thing they told me was that I shouldn't do politics, that what has light got to do with darkness, I should get out from among them. These politicians, they are evil, they are bad. They don't go there or don't go there. It's almost a sin, a sacrilege. I mean, who does that? And when the Bible says we're the light of the world, a city set on a hill that cannot be destroyed. But we yielded the space of light to darkness. And now we're complaining that we're in darkness. Why are we complaining? So the religious institutions, at least the Christian ones that I know very well, they're largely ignorant. They're largely ignorant. Even till tomorrow. Don't challenge anything government is doing. No. What the Bible says, pray for our leaders. But the truth of the matter is that Nathan challenged David because David did something inappropriate. Samuel spent his life challenging Saul and advising and challenging David. The hand of the prophet is always on top. Hear from God, tell the people. But nobody wants to do that these days because we want government patronage and benevolence, and we don't want to offend our government friends. But if they're doing well, we clap for them. If they're not doing right, we tell them that, Oga, what you did yesterday is not quite right. It's not in the best interest of the people. We need to let them know. We must speak truth to power. But our religious institutions will rather not. They remain silent. They mean, don't let them disturb my church. Don't let them affect my congregation. Let me just continue and this and that. But I don't know. When we get to heaven, then God will tell us who was right and who was wrong. Then the cultural angle, government will favor your family, government is good, blah, blah, blah. That is where we are in Nigeria. It's not the government of common interest, it's a government of, what's my own business? You know, most of the people in government, they're my friends, I know them. Why is my own? I should just go and work and make my money and just go about my way. But that way is good for me. But there's some people in the riverine areas. There's some people in the deserts of Sokoto. There's some people in the deserts of Maiduguri. There's some people in the forests of Western Nigeria who are just wallowing in ignorance and poverty, and who could be significant manpower for this great country if only we can allow some of the benefits that they deserve to come into their possession and turn their lives around. You know, how should a young boy, 13, 14 years old, be dragging cattle all the way from Maiduguri to Lagos? Is that the best use of his potential? I dare say not. That guy could be Bill Gates if he's given the opportunity, and he'll earn more money for Nigeria as Bill Gates than as a cattle rearer. There are better ways of dealing with cattle these days. You don't need to do all that. That was in the 19th century. This is the 21st century, for crying out loud. And these are the things we must do to emancipate our people and make them economically viable by themselves, so that nobody's depending on anybody for anything.
Yes. So we have 8 hands up, and we are at I think 6:43. So I'm just going to call, these are the last hands we'll take. We'll take Dr. Fakunda, we'll take Mommy Grange, we'll take Mr. Bimbola Ashiru, we'll take Stephen Akpalibolose, we'll take Sani Momo, we'll take Felix, we'll take Mr. Charles Iyore, we'll take Juliet. Those are the last hands that we'll take just because of time. So apologies if you wanted to ask a question. And please, I ask that you please keep your comments very short and to the point so that Mr. President can respond. Can we have Dr. Fakunda, please? 30 seconds or less. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Pastor. Information briefly. Nigeria need to be restructured. Afenifere just even heard me today, a committee on restructuring has been set up. The Southern Middle Belt leadership, comprising the 4 regions of Nigeria, have also set up a committee on how to be about restructuring Nigeria. That's information. Now, there's something about dates. January 15, 1966 was the day Nigeria was truncated. In 2 months, it will be January 15, 1966. Can ALG connect with other bodies to kickstart a movement, to make a call that we need to change the structure of Nigeria from that date and give us a target of October 1, 2024? That's an assignment. If you can consider it, then we can coordinate to start something concrete from January 15, 2024. Is that possible? Can ALG try that? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Mom. I've asked you to unmute.
Yes, I have unmuted. Thank you, Pastor Itua. Let me first of all address you with your 5 Ps. You have earned 5 Ps today: pastor, president, politician, professor of history, and patriot. I believe that the only P that we can fight for with you is the patriot. So all of us should try to be patriotic. Maybe we will be able to reach your level. Having said this, I really want to thank you for the history which, as you know, has now been cut out of the education of children. Quite frankly, I think we need to do something about that. I don't see why our children should be deprived of the history of their heritage. Now, the slavery that took place should have opened our eyes, particularly when we gained our freedom, because those who took us as slaves now went ahead and started living by themselves and struggling to help themselves, and they did very well. I went to England only about 5 years after the Second World War, and it was terrible. There was no hot water, running water. There was cold running water, but no hot water. You had to go outside to take your bath, your shower, in public baths. So, they were not that developed until they decided to develop themselves, and they did it indigenously. Everybody went to everybody took part in that development, having lost their slaves. So why is it that we, who now gained our freedom, would not want to develop by ourselves? That is a big question, which you have tried to answer. That's a big fundamental question, but I want to make comments on some little problems that we have with regards to our administration. You've mentioned processes. Honestly, what usually happens with policies is that the processes are not well spelled out and they are not followed to the letter. And in not following processes, you lose the ability to set up accountability mechanisms and transparency. I'll give you an example. In the ministry, I think this happens in any ministry, but definitely Ministry of Health, the minister is supposed to be accountable. However, the head of contract committees is the permanent secretary. And it's only when the permanent secretary has given the contracts that he now sends the word to the minister, and the minister has to concur. Now, how did this happen? It's obvious that some people, wanted to gain from this kind of process, and therefore they would not have to get ministers to be accountable to the people, but to them. You mentioned accountability to the people. Quite frankly, the way the processes are now, the ministers are not accountable to the people. We need to take a hard look at what is happening at administrative level, at ministerial level, so that we can be informed, educated, and therefore ask the right questions. It's not always, when things fall apart, it's not always the policies that are not being, that are falling apart. It is the processes, the procedures, and the fact that there are some people benefiting from
that.
Yes, from that.
Thank you, Ma. So it's the processes. You should answer those questions.
Processes need to
Mr. President, you have her question, right? Okay. Mr. Bimbola Ashiru, please go ahead. Because we are up on time, I'm just going to please ask
thank you very
everyone
much.
to be very short.
Thank you very much. My own is not a question. My own is more of a contribution. And first of all, my brother, Pastor Itua, I do know that you have become a president, so you have to be careful so that you don't get into trouble. We have only one president in the country. So Madam Jumoke was calling you president, so I'm a bit scared.
President, he's the president of ALG and
ALG, okay.
Yes,
so just say
so on this
president.
platform, he's the president of ALG.
Yes. Anyway, I think my own contribution is, I have a few points to make. Just give me some seconds because I'm talking from advantage position, like Dr. Grange, coming from private sector and government. First of all, I want us to equate Nigerians' problem to a polygamous family. And the problem is that our colonial masters, they knew what they were doing. I think Pastor Ita forgot to mention that when they were trying to give us our independence, they didn't want the Northerners to go because of the impoverished level then. And they said, Our Royal Majesty will not be happy, so we should come together as a country. And that's the problem we are facing today. And in a polygamous family, there's no way the man who has so many wives, we allow the wives to work together. They can never work together. They control to have divide and rule, and that's what we have in Nigeria today. Then secondly, Nigeria as a country, we have no business being an import-dependent economy. We are a blessed nation. And I remember what Clinton said when he came here during Obasanjo. He said, Nigeria, you have no business going around the world to start begging that your resources here, and it tapped the floor. This is a country that is endowed with a lot of mineral and natural resources. So we have that problem. So I'm just trying to let you know that the problem we have is enormous. Look at Libya. Libya was a fantastic country. Nobody was suffering there until they came in and killed Gaddafi. And that is the problem we are having in Africa. And then I always tell people that this so-called UN is a waste of time. Because if the UN, if they are so-called United Nations and they are uniting the nations, then we won't have problems we have in Ukraine. We won't have problems we have in Israel, Hamas, Palestine. So the problem is, as a country, we must sit down and say what we want. Because I won't say politicians, the people that are running the country, you must continue to have poverty in the country. I remember when I went to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I met with the president. He said they came to Nigeria in the 80s and they took our seats. They have done so many things with that, chewing gum, all sorts of things. But the problem is that our leaders and our people are selfish. And it's inclusive of all of us. Like I was saying that on this platform one day, I said, many members of this platform, once they get to that place and they become members of government, they start saying something else. Mm-hmm. I listened to the former NLC leader, who is now a senator, who was a governor, and he was condemning. I'm not saying what the NLC were doing, what they did was right. It was out now condemning, and then Shehu was asking him that you did the same thing when you were the same, and the story has changed. Look at the robust way he's dressing now. It's no more a fighter. You see, what I'm saying is, I think when they get there, I think there's a cause that when they get to that place, then they change entirely and they be talking in another way entirely. So even in this group, once anybody becomes a member of that place, the story will change. Then they will start attacking Mr. President, Pastor Itua. Now look, your group, you are now seeing it. You are not seeing it the way government is seeing it. Look at Kevessos. I can mention his name, Festus Kuyamo. He has changed completely. He started dressing well. Now he's a fighter. So those are the problems we have. I think the poverty level in this one. And on the last note, I said, well, the most generous, nice president we had in Nigeria is Abacha. He's still giving us back money, even in death. You can imagine how much that man has taken in this system, and the children who want to contest election, they shouldn't be walking on the streets. So we must start qualifying people's source of wealth. Once we start doing that, things will change in this country. But we don't do that. They are the ones we are celebrating. We want to invite them to our parties everywhere because we don't even know how they got the money. So we need to start qualifying people's source of wealth, and that will change things in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we had those three questions, Mr. President. Do you want to just address that quickly so that we can take the last set? You're muted. Can you unmute?
Let me address them very quickly. Most of them are echoing what I already said. And most of them are actually comments, not even questions, okay? ALG, a movement to call to change Nigerian structure from that date. I think we'll discuss that at our management meeting and then see if it is something we're ready to take on also and what it will cost us to take it on. But my own thinking is that it's not even the structure of Nigeria that we should be talking about or restructuring. We should be rediscussing Nigeria completely. We should be rediscussing Nigeria, not even asking for a restructure. We should just rediscuss Nigeria. Are we happy with Nigeria? Are we happy with the foundation that was laid? Are we happy with ourselves as a group of people? Do people want different things entirely of Nigeria? And then when everybody has spoken and we all come to some kind of agreement, then we can take decisions as to what next to do. If living together as a nation, Pakistan left India and they're all doing very well. So maybe that's the first thing. Let us agree to disagree. If we have common assets and things, let us agree as to how to share them. If we need one thing from the other, let us agree on terms of engagement. You need my pot, I need your oil, I need your groundnuts and your leather, you need my fish. Let us agree on how to work amicably together and then move on from there. That's in response to Mr. Fakunda. Professor Grange also talked about the processes, and the processes are driven by the people. And if the people are blissfully ignorant or willfully stubborn or misbehaving, and we, the people, do not have the capacity or the knowledge or the competence to call them to order, we shall continue to have an abuse of these processes. The reasons why Europe is working is that everybody knows his rights and they stand on that right, and everybody's right is protected by everybody. And until we get to that knowledge in Nigeria, it can't happen. And what organizations like ALG need to continue to do is continue to ensure that we have this discourse to get to that level. Hopefully, like my brother Bimbo has said, one of us will not get coerced into government and then change his tune or change his approach and things like that. Most people are complaining about government because they're not in government. And most of the time, the rabble-rousing is to attract government attention to get them into government. And Babangida was the king of that.
We are losing your audio. We are losing your audio.
And silence. And so some people use it as a tactic to get into government. That's why you have 27 presidential candidates all shouting all over the place, attracting attention, not even really campaigning, just so that they can get recognized and acknowledged and win.
Okay, I think Faye, please, can you please check on his network? Okay, is he back? Okay,
right.
Yeah, you're back.
So,
okay.
We all know that part of the British structure was a deliberate empowerment of the North. In fact, what Lord Lugard said, which I didn't mention, was that he found the Hausas to be better soldiers and to be more amenable to military discipline and military endurance. He says they were men who could march for miles. Their feet were very thick and strong. They were disease avoidable. They were obedient to instruction. And therefore, he wanted most of the West African frontier force, which was the military agent at the time, to be skilled and tooled with the Hausas. And it was a deliberate policy. And that policy skewed the army in Nigeria even till tomorrow. And these are all the foundations that our masters who had many wives laid and rediscuss this thing called have these issues. Okay. And I agree with him. We have no business being an import-dependent country. That's what I said. I said, if I was president of Nigeria, the first thing is that we will no longer import food. We will eat what we grow and grow what we eat. We will no longer need to import a lot of the things we're importing. Because take bitumen, for example. He was commissioner in Ogun State. He knows that Ogun State, Ondo State, there are bitumen deposits in Nigeria that nobody is touching because of the structure of the federal government that does not allow certain states to harvest their natural minerals. We have bitumen in Nigeria. Why are we importing bitumen to build our roads? And everything is in Nigeria. Iron ore, gold, bauxite, manganese, everything. I was joking with a young girl yesterday that this Gucci bag and this Louis Vuitton you people are carrying up and down. Most of the leather comes from Kano. You know, they take the leather from Kano, take it to Italy, they design the thing, take it to China to make, and you people go to Selfridges and Harrods and buy your own leather at houses that at monies that can buy little houses. You know, it's all the challenge we're facing. And of course, everybody knows that IMF, World Bank, United Nations is not united with Israel. These are the interests that have been promoted. That's why they founded these establishments, not for our benefits, not at all. It was for their own benefits. And you can't blame them. I mean, if we're in their shoes, we probably would do worse. Okay, everybody's protecting their interests.
Okay, so we have 5 hands up. Is his audio, is he frozen or is it me? Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and take
the next one.
Yeah,
question.
we are going to take, we have 5 hands up, so can you just take them all together and they'll keep it short to the point? 30 seconds or less. Mr. Stephen Lawson,
it's after
please go ahead.
7 or...
Yeah, it's almost, it's 7 o'clock.
It's after
the
7.
hands were already up. 30 seconds or 20 seconds or less. Please go ahead, Stephen.
Okay, thank you very much. The reality of today's governance, especially as we see, is that it's not easy. The moment somebody gets in there, they are contending with too many interests, and it's not their fault. Until you are in government, you will understand the fact that they are not standing alone. It's a political structure. Nevertheless, Mandela had made an expression for the fact that if Nigeria gets it right, then there is hope for Africa. So my question would be that if there is a tsunami that would happen that can change the system as it is, would that not be a better option? And then secondly, how do we raise about 1 to 20 million Nigerians who can get involved in the political system, especially with a common charter? Because we need to understand that this is 2023. By 2027, it's another political circle. By 2031, there will be another political circle. How do we begin to prepare ourselves to ensure that we do not become victims as we were in 2023? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, do you want to take all the hands, or we should just take a couple because of time?
I think because of time, we can't take everybody. Just take
just take
two
the
more.
next one.
Close.
Okay. Can we take Mr. Sani? How many more do you want to take?
Take Sani. 2 more.
Yes.
2 more.
Okay. Can we take Mr. Sani and Felix?
Mr. Sani,
and we apologize
one more
to
person.
others?
Right, I'm here. Thank you very much. Just want to ask real quick, what do you have to say about Nigerians and the lack of integrity? As we know, integrity is doing something right when no one is watching. I ask this because we all want what's best for Nigeria as a country. We all hope to do the best things we can if we get into a leadership position or political positions. And when we do get in those positions, we do the opposite and do exactly what those politicians do. So do you think Nigerians have integrity issues? Do you think integrity as a whole has been, we lack that integrity to do what's right? Is this something we've developed from our ancestors, or where is this coming from?
Thank
or what
you.
would you say, about integrity in Nigerians?
Thank you. And then the last one from Mr. Felix. Mr. Felix, please go ahead with your question or comment.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Please
I
keep
just
it
want to yes, I just want to take a little exception to what the president has said in terms of Nigeria not working. Yes, the colonial master may have designed a system which we all have realized. In every problem, there can be a way out. If Nigeria has been designed not to work and we have realized it, we can work a way out of it. For example, the job issue, I think the politicians designed a system to impoverish the people so that they can continue to dictate our source or means of livelihood, our lifestyle. I must advocate at this point that individual empowerment can go a long way to give us a sense of belongingness. For example, I have an MSc, my wife is a graduate. We were told for over 16 years without a job until my wife picked up a fashion, training skill. As I speak to you now at the veranda of my house, my wife is doing well. Customers are flowing in from everywhere. With this, a politician cannot give me 5,000 naira to go and carry gun and kill for him because I now have my sense of belongingness. So let's take a step further by encouraging and educating everyone to go into something that will give them source of livelihood so that they can start their ground when politicians come. With that, we'll have a better society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay, so let me take the last question first. If Nigeria was working, Mr. Felix, you wouldn't be at home for 15 years, you and your wife, graduates without a job. The first thing is that the Nigerian system and society did not train you appropriately to face the responses of the economy. I thank God that somehow your wife got the revelation of this thing to start up fashion. But any other country in the world, any other responsible government would have been able at some stage to begin to encourage and redirect both you and your wife to find gainful employment or to start your own businesses. That is what they do in Israel. That's what they do in Singapore. That's what they even begin to do now in China and in Dubai and in India. But the government, who should try because of planning. I was talking to a young boy yesterday. He's my nephew, my friend's son. He has an MSc in transport planning from Canada. And he says the discussion is not even available in Nigeria. That in Canada, when you are going to build a house, you have to get a transport engineer to come and consult for you and advise government on how your house or your building or your office is going to affect the transport network of that area now and in the future. That they think 50, 100 years ahead in places like that. That's what a government does, a responsible government, thinking 100 years ahead for each of its citizens, okay? So when Canada is inviting Nigerians to come to Canada, it's not that they're stupid or they love Nigerians. It's that they see that they are painfully short of manpower, that they need to develop the economy, and they will take your manpower if you have no regard for your manpower. I said, if you take Nigerians out of the health institution in Houston, in London, even in Maryland, and even in some parts of Europe, the health institution there will collapse because it's being manned by manpower all over the place. Even in their universities, most of their professors are Nigerians. So let's pack that in one place, Mr. Felix. Yeah? And part of the issue is who will bail the cat? Who will make sure that Nigerians come together and retrain themselves? Again, that is what ALG is trying to do, because we see that there's a vacuum, there's a lacuna, nobody is taking responsibility, nobody is trying to respond to the needs of the people, and the government is not. So we want to take up that responsibility and help the people to help themselves. So I hope you will join us to do that. and realize a better Nigeria. Mr. Sani Momo, you know, when the Portuguese came to Nigeria or came to Benin, they found that a set of people, well-structured, well-organized, very honest, had a lot of integrity. They were so honest that the houses had neither door nor window because nobody would go into anybody's house to steal. Please note that corruption is an English word, and some lexicons or languages in Nigeria had no such word until recently. Even bribe in Yoruba is called riba, is an adulteration of the word bribe. Say one thing on riba, they give somebody riba, is an adulteration of the word bribe. Because we had honor, we had dignity, we had integrity, we were men of our word until these Europeans came and began to divide us by separating us in terms of our love for money. Most of what they did to our cultural traditional rulers was to give them dash, you know, so that with that dash, they sold their people or they allowed the Europeans to take advantage of their resources. So, and they ensured that they introduced some elements of corruption into our leadership so that they could divide us also along those lines. So as a natural people, as we evolved over time, we had integrity. But now that integrity has been distorted and abused, so much so that we have become both the poverty and the corruption part to cover almost capital of the world. We're second in line in corruption index all over the world. I think there's a country that's ahead of us, one of these South American states, okay? But we can reverse that. We can reverse that by ensuring that those who have the voice can rise and speak against this lack of integrity that we have. Lee Kuan Yew was able to do it in Singapore, and I think it is also possible in Nigeria. Stephen, I agree that there are many, many interests in Nigeria, and one of the things that's really, really lacking is that vision for Nigeria. We all know what the American dream is, at least for the so-called Americans that have accepted themselves and imposed themselves as Americans, okay? The dream is to have a prosperous nation and a prosperous people who can be anything that they want to be within the confines of their ability. We need to have a Nigerian dream that will unite us instead of having separate interests that divide us. Yes, we may be culturally different and all that, but what is the Nigerian dream? A strong Nigeria where everybody has a voice, where everybody's voice is heard, where everybody can aspire to greatness and contribute their own quota to the development of Nigeria, where we can be proud Nigerians and say we are men of integrity and we're men of stature and strength. That should be the Nigerian dream, a prosperous Nigeria with prosperous individuals who can aspire to become anything without knowing anybody by the force of their and the tenacity of their competence and their capabilities, where the nation provides an even playing field for everybody to contribute their own quota to the development of Nigeria and the African continent. That should be the Nigerian dream, which we all should probably pursue. And that might put an end to a lot of the little fracases that we're having amongst ourselves and trying to eat up and destroy ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for this very long session and for staying in tune. I'm beginning to think we may need to repeat it at some stage where we can have another conversation about Nigeria and then take as many of the questions that people want to throw at us as is available. I think the management team will discuss it and see when it's possible to have another edition of this. But I want to thank everybody for listening to me patiently and for your kind words thus far. God bless you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening and a great weekend ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for those very insightful discussion. Thank you. Have a good night.
We do apologize for those whose questions we couldn't take, and that's why I think we might need to have a repeat discourse so that everybody can contribute their quota. You know, part of what we want to do on LLG is that everybody has a voice, and your voice must be heard. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, Sonny, thank you so much. God
Yes,
bless
sir.
you both.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonny. God
Yeah.
bless you. Yeah. How's Madam and the kids? Please
They
give
are-
them my love.
They will hear. They are doing great. They are doing great.
Yeah. Sonny, you are looking very, very happy. I think Ireland is a bit better than